Good morning. Welcome to class. Good job being on time. Proud of you. Eight. Were you just waiting out there to do that? That was
perfect.
That was epic timing. Good job. Love it. Thank you. Thanks. Really excited to be with you here today. This is a fantastic conference. I love it. I've been here 7 or 8 times and it gets better every time. New people come through, a lot of first-timers as well, as we saw earlier. And I hope that you catch the excitement and experience of it and return with other people and just enjoy the sunshine and the hospitality and picking up a couple of things throughout the weekend that really you can take with you. This morning, I've been in lots of sessions like this. Many of them have very dense PowerPoint slides with about 27 bullet points, and you're just going crazy. This is not necessarily going to be one of them. I'm actually going to kind of ask you to think a little bit this morning. I didn't ask to be at 8:30, I'm sorry. This is a little more thought-provoking. There's a little more stuff on the screen to look through and think through. It's not necessarily going to be super didactic, so go with me on that. But 3 killer mistakes that leaders make is part of what I've been rumbling through over the last 10 years or so as I've taken a journey into leadership. A quick kind of just survey of, is this going to work? Let's see if this works. There we go. Of just kind of what I've done. I'm not going to show you family pictures. That's what Facebook's for, right? I got my BA and BS in psychology in 2002, my MDiv from St. Louis in 2006, and I put off doing PhD work, but I've started that again, and I should be finishing, as long as my dissertation goes well, in about 25 at Concordia Chicago in their program for organizational leadership. So I've been knee-deep in a lot of this stuff for quite a while. And I personally love the research side of it. I love digging into the deeper reasons why leaders do what they do. So you read a lot of leadership books, and it's 3 reasons for this, and 7 reasons for this, and ways to do success. And they summarize a lot of the research. Well, I was the guy who would go to the footnotes in the back and be like, where are they getting this from? I don't really trust them. Or I want to see it for myself. So that's what led me to go and really dig into this, which hopefully give some insights into what we're going to talk about today. My first church was a really enormous church in Wisconsin. It was a lot of fun. I loved it as being part of a big staff. And then I took a call to plant a brand new church on the northwest side of Chicago. So I've been doing that for the last 10, 12 years or so. It's just, time flies, right? It's been there for a long time. The church has grown. It's been a lot of fun. We're still in that kind of small church phase where pre-COVID we had about 150 people, 200 people maximum. And we'll see what happens after COVID, how that all shakes out as well. So these are things that you can apply at anywhere that you are. Frankly, they apply within who you are as you lead people in every domain that you're active in all of your vocations, in all of your relationships. This is not pastor specific, it's not church specific. It's things that we make mistakes in, that we can fix, that we can take, that will make our relationships healthy and our work better. I'm blessed to be able to work with LCEF a little bit to do some consulting with their capital campaigns and ministry solutions and doing vision and strategy. It's a lot of fun. I'm working with a church in Wisconsin right now and one in New York. And I was blessed during a sabbatical year to take a bunch of classes at Northwestern University at their business school, Kellogg School of Management. Absolutely amazing. They run, just so you know, if you're interested in leadership, they run a nonprofit management program that is very inexpensive. In fact, if you work at a nonprofit, you get automatic 50% off the tuition. So it's like a couple $100 per class. And you get to sit with world-class professors and learn about alignment and strategy and all the things that really you're interested in. It's an incredible opportunity. So check that out if you do get a chance. So where are we going today? I have 3 mistakes for you. There are many, many more mistakes. I think I jotted down about 20 when I was getting ready. And I'm sure you have many more that you've seen other people do, none of which that you have done. I'm sure that we don't need a lot of help in that area. But I wanted to break down just 3 of them for you. One has to do with what happens in your brain, with what's going on with the things you consume. The first mistake is all about that, and the way to fix it is through discernment. The second one is all about your work. It has to do with your passions, what you are really going out and doing through what you do as work. The fix for that is having vision. And the third one has to do with working with other people, because, like it or not, you have to work with other people. I have a 15-year-old son and a 13-year-old son. And the 15-year-old is a classic introvert. Classic. And so this is my mantra to him most days. Son, you got to work with people. Got to figure it out. It has to work. You have to make it work. And this one is all about understanding who you are in relationship to others. That is the fix, is looking at that. So let's dive in here. Mistake number one is this: misapplying novelty and nuance. This is one of the things that I see throughout life. This is a consumption mistake. So what do you consume every day? I'm assuming most of you consumed coffee a little bit ago. I'm about halfway through mine, so I might talk faster as we get going here. What else do you consume? Media. What kind of media? Books? Facebook? Social media? News, anybody? Anybody still watch the news? Wait, watch, read? Somehow consume in some way? What else do you consume? On your phone, what do you do when you're doing this all the time? What are you doing? You're scrolling somehow. Is this TikTok or is this Facebook? Okay, all right. Depends on, it's a generational thing, right? What do you consume? So, novelty and nuance is a dichotomy. It's a paradigm that I look through to try to understand what I'm consuming. Novelty, obviously, is something that is novel. It's new. It's interesting. Anybody like just going from one new thing to the next? Technology, who's got the latest iPhone? It's novel. Is it really better than the previous iPhone? So I'm just gonna start a war here right at the beginning. I apologize. So novelty is all about new. Nuance is about the deep understanding of it. Is there something slightly different that gives you a deeper understanding of a topic or a scenario or whatever it is? Understanding how to apply these effectively allows you to really navigate what's going into your brain. Because right now, in our world, attention is everything. Getting people's attention is the focus of every major company in the world. And it's not just about traditional marketing means anymore, because as you go to social media and online, all they're trying to do is grab your attention and hold it as long as humanly possible. But attention is the one resource that you can't create more of. You just can't, because it's your time. Right? All you have is a certain amount of time. And one of the most brilliant things that's happened in the last 10 years is the idea of a second screen. Having a second viewing screen at the same time. Whoever made that happen, and whatever big company that did it is a genius. Because it opened up a brand new market for more attention. But can you really give your attention to two things at the same time? People say that you can do two things at once. You can be a multitasker. Have you guys read all the most recent stuff about multitasking? It doesn't work. It doesn't work. You just can't. Since attention is everything, have you guys seen this? There's a QR code. You can play this video on your own. I'm not going to play it here for you. This is a pastor in Oklahoma, a very, very famous pastor, who on his Vision Sunday at his church wanted to make a point. He wanted to talk about how we need to see clearly. And so he went to the parable of how Jesus used spit and put it in a man's eyes to heal his blindness. Now, I don't know how you guys would teach that parable or talk about it, but it's a really visceral parable. You can see what's happening. You can picture that happening. Well, let's talk about novelty and nuance a little bit. There's a lot of nuanced stuff in that parable to learn and to go. The decision that this church made was to do something very novel, was to actually reenact the parable, not actually heal somebody of their blindness, but for the pastor to multiple times multiple times. I'm not going to show you this video because I'd probably lose half of you after it. It's the disgust factor is pretty big, but to spit into his hand, and to his, I think this is his brother-in-law, I think that's how the story went, to wipe it all over his face. Right? See, she's out. That's why I didn't show it. What was he trying to do? What was the point? He was trying to get attention. He was trying to get views. And did it work? Yeah, it absolutely worked. Tons, millions. It's on NBC News. It's on all the major news outlets because it's shocking. It's amazing. And this is a guy at a church during his Vision Sunday. Now, what kind of attention did he get? I mean, I'm sure a lot of it was uncomfortable. I'm sure a lot of it was not positive. But for many people, the idea of getting attention, of doing what's novel, doesn't matter if it's positive or negative, because the point is simply just getting and holding your attention. Because when you do that, you gain a hearing with people, and they learn who you are. Does anybody know who Michael Todd is? I mean, some of us did, some of us didn't. I've never seen him before in your life, but today you do. Because some random guy at this random conference you're at puts it on a screen. When I was at the seminary, one of the professors would say, and maybe you've heard this before too, was to be careful what illustrations you use in your sermon, because people will often remember the illustration more than the point. And it's a good way to talk about distinguishing between novelty and nuance. Understanding what you're trying to do with nuance and not getting in its way with novelty. As I recommend you watching that video. It's something else. So what happens when you make this mistake? What happens when you mess up? When you take novelty into an area that needs nuance. If you're making something ridiculous that really has a deeper meaning, well, you end up diminishing its value. You end up taking what should be deep learning and just diminishing it, making it, cheap. Right? That's what PR stunts are. You fall for it and you think, why did I fall for that? The other side of it is nuance. When you add nuance into something that is just novel, you end up inflating its worth. For example, I'm sure you all have posted something on social media that was just for fun. Maybe it was a meme, maybe it was just a funny saying or something that you noticed. And I guarantee somebody came along and posted something on there that was maybe not nice. Like, why are you talking about that? What is this all about? You're like, this was just for fun. This is just for fun. Why are you getting on me about this? What is going on? That's the mistake here. When you make a joke that is just supposed to be funny, but somebody takes it very seriously and really just takes it too far. That's the mistake there. So, internet trolls, this is classic internet troll behavior. Adding nuance into something that's just supposed to be novel. Right? For example, this meme. It's just supposed to be funny, right? It's just Sheldon. Now, if you know anything about Big Bang Theory, Sheldon is maybe one of the biggest trolls of all, right? He has no filter. He has no filter on what he's doing, and he just trolls everybody around him. I mean, you could even go so far as to write a dissertation about how ridiculous Sheldon is and what a hypocrite he is and how his character really helps you just understand the meaning and the depth and the breadth of people who just have a really low emotional IQ. Have I just taken this too far? This was just supposed to be a meme, and yet I very easily took 30 seconds and made it way too much. This is nuance into something that's just supposed to be novel. So the mistake is misapplying this. It's not understanding what you're consuming and what the purpose of it is. And when you misapply it, you make a whole lot of mistakes. Putting these things in a 2x2 grid. When the leader means to just have fun, to do something novel, and the hearer also understands it's just supposed to be novel, what do you get out of it? It's just fun, right? You just have a good time. You just laugh together. And when you are leading a team as a leader, and they are clear, they understand your sense of humor, they understand the reason why they're going to go and do this silly thing together. You're going to go to an escape room, right? You're going to go have fun together. And they realize that it's just for fun. Like their job does not depend on their performance in the escape room. There's no performance evaluation there. It's just for fun. It's just to be together. That works out really well. Same thing down here. When the leader is bringing nuance to the conversation, and the hearer also is in the position to understand that this is a nuanced conversation, then this sense of deep learning can happen. You can grow. You can actually influence the people that are around you as a leader. Those two areas work really well. On the other side, you basically get the character of Michael Scott from The Office. Is really what he does. Whenever he's trying to bring nuance into a conversation, everybody else is just, they've tuned out. They think he's ridiculous. They hear novelty. And the same thing on the other way. When he's trying to be funny, is he ever funny to anybody else? Like, never. They're always like, what are you saying? This is terrible. You get this sense of dry humor and everything just falls flat. Does that make sense? Okay. So how do we fix this? Well, this is all about consuming the things that you see. How do you understand the things that come into your brain? Can you look at it through this paradigm of novelty or nuance and help you make sense of it? Well, the first thing that you do is you slow down. Recent behavioral research of the last 20 years just is super clear about this, is that we have a part of ourselves that just jumps to conclusions, and it's very helpful in many situations, but not for thinking. Not for thinking through things that may be nuanced. So, the first thing to do when you consume something is to slow down. Maybe you can ask yourself, why am I consuming this? So you find yourself scrolling on your phone for 5 minutes and you're like, why am I consuming this? Maybe now you can do that after the first 10 seconds instead of after the first 10 minutes. What's it for? Well, maybe you say, maybe I'm just here to blow off some steam for a minute. And I'm just going to look at stuff for a minute. Okay, fine. But you've made that conscious decision. You've slowed down. You've thought about it. And you've made the decision. Identify the purpose of what you're consuming. Is it for nuance or is it for novelty? Are you reading a news site for nuance or for novelty? And is the news site actually communicating nuance, or is it only communicating novelty? If you don't ask yourself that question, the media that you consume will be put in the wrong box. Right? This is all about discernment. So, as I mentioned before, the past, as a church worker, as somebody who works in a church, this is always on our minds. It's always about how we're communicating the gospel of Jesus through what we say and through what we do. If we take our time to understand the purpose of what we're doing, we can have a lot of fun. Because we know that when we're just having fun with people, we can just have fun. But when it's time to learn, we can focus. We can learn. We can grow together. We can have those deep moments and that deep meaning. So I think this is a really helpful way to look at that. Look through the lens of novelty and nuance. Use a sermon to identify which one it is and go forward. All right. That's number one. Number two is, I think, is very interesting. This is about your work. This is about your passions. This is about what you are doing with your gifts and skills. And there might be some disagreement on this, but I think this is true. I think that it's a mistake to chase a win instead of avoiding a loss in many cases. What do I mean by that? Well, I don't know if you've ever read any leadership type books. Many of them follow case studies of people who are successful, whether it's executives or companies or whatever it is, and they try to analyze what these people did at certain times to be successful. So, sometimes I think that is a mistake. Why? Because studying winners is noisy. What do I mean by that? Well, what I mean by that is that looking at why people did things and how they did them in a certain time and in a certain context is very particular, right? I don't know about you, but my memory of how things happened at my church when it was starting, in my kids' life when they were younger, over time, what happens to it? Kind of fades a little bit, doesn't it? And sometimes, I don't know if maybe this is just me, but it doesn't just fade, but it also... Okay, so we're all... Okay, good. This isn't just me. Thank you. I appreciate it. So when very smart people are going back to study who has won, the people who win, their journeys probably started 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago. And they take interviews, and they do research on those. What kind of information are they getting? This is where there's a new book by Daniel Kahneman, previous Nobel Prize winner in economics. He wrote a book called Thinking Fast and Slow like 10 years ago. The new book is called Noise. And it's all about how we view information in the world and how we don't often realize that a lot of the information we see is noisy. In other words, it's scattered. Like the bits and pieces that we see may or may not correlate with one another. And it's hard for us as human beings to slow down, to think it through, and to be skeptical and think in probabilistic terms. To think that, well, maybe there's a 90% chance that this story is actually accurate, or maybe there's only 70%. We're really bad at estimating that. So we usually skip over it. But the remembrances and the data are very noisy. It suffers from this kind of the right time and the right place problem. The best leaders and the best stories of success stories will always start off with, they'll ask a CEO this question, well, how did you make this decision? How did you get to where you are? The best guys and gals will say, well, I was just kind of at the right time in the right place. They'll recognize the coincidence and the complex of different things that had to happen to make these things happen. That it wasn't all just them and their great skills and their systems they brought. Sure, they're bright and they have all those things, but there's something just about the coincidences, which maybe we wouldn't call coincidences here, right? That really put these people in that kind of position. So, for example, consider this. I mean, it's just a circle. It's not much to consider. But inside of it are all the possible outcomes of something that you are doing. So, parenting your children. Here are all the possible outcomes of how that's going to turn out. That's a big circle, right? The things you do at work, a strategic objective you want to make happen. Everything fits inside the circle, right? And in the center of the circle is where you would consider it to be a success. Okay, so you got you're shooting arrows at a target, right? So what happens when you start to shoot arrows at this target? And here's the best part about this: you can't miss the target. Every time you're going to hit somewhere inside the circle because it's all the possible outcomes, right? So how many of you are good shots? Like, do you think? I mean, you're going to hit the center of the target more often than not? Yeah? No? Anybody pretty good with that? So we're going to be scattered, aren't we? Sometimes it's going to win, sometimes it's not. And if we study the winners of all the arrows that land in the center circle, we're going to learn a few things. But it's noisy, right? Because chances are, if they try it again at a different time, it's going to land outside of there. So when I say a mistake is studying the winners, instead we should avoid losing. Here's what I mean by that. What I would recommend that we do is to try to shrink our circle. I think the work that leaders do can be more effective if we try to take away a lot of the possible outcomes of a plan that we are working on. If we can simply make this circle smaller and take away all of these things, we can give our team and ourselves a higher probability of success. In other words, if we're going to try this thing 2 or 3 times, if this circle is small, if we take away a lot of the ways that we can lose, we have a much higher chance of being in the right place at the right time, of making it work. I used pictures and I talked math. Are we okay? It's early. Are we doing all right? Yeah, please.
Okay. It is one of the things I love, and it's a challenge about this conference.
Yep.
We've been coming to a lot. Because a lot of times, we share our best practices,
Mm-hmm.
and then the idea is, can I then take that and implement it in my spot?
Yep.
And this is, I think, addresses this in an interesting way. I haven't thought of it this way. I guess
Good.
I'll process it. But essentially, that never works. You can't come in and say, I will do what that guy or that gal did in their setting, and I'll just transplant it to my spot. And I think this speaks to that.
Yeah.
You gotta.
That's part of it. That's a piece of it, yes. Absolutely, because, yeah, you're absolutely right.
You tweak and you do it in your setting, because real success is a perfect storm.
It's a lot of things coming together at the same time, right? Yep. How do we help this out? Well, The first thing is just identify systematic mistakes. Instead of studying the winners, study the losers. I mean, we're not calling people losers. I mean, you know what I'm saying, right? Study how things fail. Because when you study how things fail, you start to see ways that either the system that's being used or the whatever it is, there are specific ways that are repeatable, the ways that people fail. I went into church planting 12 years ago with zero formal training. Like this was... the church I went to was amazing. They had run a capital campaign to do a church plant. They had done all the fundraising. Then they called a pastor and said, hey, can you figure out how to make this happen? And me, being a little bit crazy, said, sure, why not? And a lot of what I learned over that time was simply, there is no silver bullet. There is no way to just hit that center target. But there are a ton of ways that you can identify very quickly to stay on the outside or miss it completely. So if you can shrink the possible outcomes, you have a much higher probability of being in the right place at the right time. Do a pre-mortem with your team. So thinking smaller picture, you're just doing a project with your team. One of the first questions that you can ask to get your team thinking about this is to ask them, how can this fail miserably? Right? You want to run a new type of VBS this summer. And you're like, oh, this is great. Everybody's excited about how to make this work. But one of the first things that you do is like, well, how can this crash and burn? What are the ways that this can just go off the rails? Because once people get over the shock of you asking them that, then they'll start to think. Like, oh, well, this might not happen, this might not happen. And you can work within, most of those things are under your control, to make sure those things don't happen. A second thing that goes along with this is expertise. Is that we typically overvalue experts in subject matters. We overvalue their opinions, we overvalue their predictions especially. But the main question in this area of the second one is, maybe the question you take with you is, how can I get more wins per attempt? Which starts you thinking probabilistically. You start to think more like, well, you can have hope, you can have vision, you can share vision, you can be super 100% committed to that vision, say we are going this way, it's going to be amazing, and you can still honor the fact that it probably isn't going to go exactly the way you think it's going to go. Even if it's a win, a success, it's probably not going to look exactly like you picture it, and that's okay, right? That's the portion, that's where God has plans that are bigger and different than what we have, and usually even better than what we have. And He makes incredible things happen. So this reminds us that we are not totally in control of everything, which is super helpful. All right, I have an in-between mistake. I was only going to give you 3, but I really like this one. So I'm going to just add it in real quick. I'm going to give you a resource. The mistake here is understanding that specialists rule the world. Because we live in a world that really encourages people to become specialists. My kids right now at their high school, they have 6 different academies that they can go into junior year to help them specialize in a certain area. Engineering, medical academy, all these kind of things. Like by the time they're 15, they're specializing in all this stuff. Okay, it's good. Specialists help us do things. We couldn't have gotten to the moon. You wouldn't have a phone in your pocket if we didn't have incredible specialists who knew how to make those things happen. As a leader, we often overvalue the role of specialists in our world and in our teams. There's a great book that just came out. It's called Range. It's by David Epstein, and it's all about why generalists triumph in a specialized world. David Epstein is a journalist, but he pulls together research. This is extensive footnotes in the back kind of book, which is my kind of book. In the research that he summarizes and brings together, he talks about how specialists are like narrow view hedgehogs, or whatever, hedgehogs and foxes. They have a narrow view, they understand one thing really, really well, and they're really, really good at it. One of his examples was Albert Einstein. Knew one thing, did it really, really well. However, in a world where everybody is encouraged to be Einsteins, because we teach them to be little Einsteins from the time that they're young. How many of you are singing the song in your head? There you go. The people who are going to lead all of the Einsteins, the people who are actually going to lead the teams that make things happen, that produce the things that the specialists make, are integrators. They're foxes. They're people who are generalists, who know a lot of little things. And you can help the people who are really good at those one things work together and collaborate and make things work. So, this is my recommendation to you as a leader is, if you don't know, if you're not a specialist, that's okay. In fact, it might even be a better thing to know a little bit of everything so that you can help others integrate it all. Because frankly, that's what you're trying to do wherever you are when you're leading, right? Is to work yourself out of the position, is to be able to have people around you who are able to do bigger and better things than you could do on your own. Integrators make that happen. All right, that's an aside. Read more about that later. The last one is about humans, and it's all about dealing with other people and your relationships. So mistake number 3 is treating HR like RR. What does HR stand for? Human resources. That is a very human-sounding phrase, isn't it? It's kind of robotic. That's kind of what we treat it like. Robotic resources. Right? The mistake that leaders make often is treating humans like robots. I mean, they may be cute. They might be helpful. They might vacuum your house while you're gone. They might do a lot of things for us in the next 10, 20 years. But they're not human. They're not human, right? One of the up-and-coming places for research in psychology and behavioral economics and that whole realm is going to be human resources. There's a big push right now in trying to understand how we help actual humans work together, especially because many of us are talking to one another in a digital way. We've taken extremely human attributes out of our communication, out of our work life, since people are working from home and more now as well, and trying to understand how we actually bring humanity back into our work, into the workplace, and everything else. Previously, human resources is kind of, what do you think of when you think of human resources? Maybe I'm odd in this too. What's human resources for you? Paperwork. Job descriptions. Yep. What else? What's that? Complaints, yes. Yeah, typically you have somebody on staff. Who is HR in the office? Toby, that's right. Toby. Oh. Poor Toby. Typically we think of HR as compliance. It's making people adhere to rules and boundaries and things either when they mess up or when they're onboarded or when they leave, or it's paperwork. It's being an HR person is not something your kids aspire to do. A lot of people fall into that unless you actually realize the power of HR. The power of HR is treating humans like humans. It's actually helping people develop and grow into better humans. I think the church world has a lot to say about this. And that's what people are starting to understand. Richard Thaler, who won the Nobel Prize recently, he has a famous book called Nudge. I don't know if you've ever heard of Nudges. His whole crusade right now is to help the world put humanity back into HR. And we have a lot to say about that. We can help out with that. And one of the big words right now is human-centered systems. Well, okay, so what? What is that all about? Well, when you have a system of compliance, where paperwork has to get filled out, things have to happen in a timely way, complaints have to get handled, you're asking people to simply comply with whatever is happening, making sure they fit inside a mold, fit inside a box, according to whose idea? According to whatever the organization says, right? According to whatever the CEO says, according to whatever top-level thing is happening. But just like everything else in this world, everything is shifted. It's flipped upside down. Corporations, organizations don't have nearly as much power anymore because people talk, because of social media, because of the expectations of people that they can be a part of an organization. And so the power is shifted to the bottom. And the same thing goes for HR. So a lot of people are asking, what if we flip human resources on its head, no longer make it about compliance, wholly, totally, but make it about actually developing people in their gifts and skills. This is what the business world is doing right now. They're trying to figure out, how do we help people grow in their gifts and skills? Sounds like we could help a little bit, right? This is human. This is what we are all about. We are about helping people live who Jesus is in them, in their world, in all their ways, especially at their workplace. this is an incredible way that we can speak into what's happening in our culture by encouraging this. Question is, which humans are we going to center around? Typically, it was the people at the top, right? Whatever they needed, whatever they wanted, whatever they needed to make everybody else comply with, they would create a vision, they would create a mission at the top, and what would it do? It would just trickle down and filter down. Have you guys ever done that at your churches or your work? Kind of just one day you come in, all right, here's the vision of the church. Now everybody, get on board. Let's go. Does that work well for you? It never works well. We've all tried it. We've all tried it. And whether it's not at your church or it's in your family or whatever it doesn't work. So instead, even businesses, all organizations are really starting to focus on the people that work within them, or for us, our members, or our community. Whoever interacts with our church, with our organization, are the people through whom we center what we do. This is a big shift, because no longer can we always rely on compliance. Instead, we have to be empowerers. No longer are we gatekeepers, we are empowerers of people. There is an enormous difference working at a church or an organization where there's a business director. You guys have all worked at places where somebody is the business director, or they're the ones who write the checks, they're the ones who control the expenses and everything else. If that person has a mindset where they are the gatekeeper, that is a completely different culture when that person has the mindset of being an empowerer of ministry. Right? You can picture the behaviors and the actions that happen in both of those. The gatekeeper is always going to be concerned with compliance and making sure everything is accounted for and asking you why and why and why and why. But the empowerer already knows why, because they're part of the vision with you. They understand why things are happening. And their question is always, how can I help? How can I help? How can I help? And that's the big shift happening now. I don't think that even though this is natural to church organizations, it's still something we haven't adopted, or we haven't actually made happen as well. So it's a mistake that we make as leaders. So I want you to think about this. What if your organization let you set your own salary? Honestly, they came to you and said, what would you like to be paid this year? What would you do? Honestly, you cheered. So
Salary study of what people in similar positions in the area are being paid.
Look how responsible you are.
I am very responsible.
There you go.
It's the Tom Brady child.
It's a Tom Brady model, yeah. What else? What would you do? How would you approach that?
You have to look at your budget still. You can't just sit there and say, well, I want $100,000, and if your budget can't sustain it, then
Yep. What else? What other questions would you have? No, you guys are good with that? You're like, I can handle it? It's weird. It's awkward, right? But notice the first two responses we had were pretty responsible responses. They're like, well, what can we afford? Your first thoughts were, how do I fit in with this organization? And how can I be responsible with this organization? How can I, through what I do, help this organization grow? Your first thoughts weren't even for you necessarily. I think people assume that everybody's going to be extremely self-interested and extremely selfish, when that typically may not be the case. There have been studies lately of startup companies that are doing this. This is happening right now in many startup companies. It was piloted in European countries at larger corporations as well. And what they find is that people, on the whole, 98% of the time, are very responsible. It helps them, asking this question, actually implementing it, it helps them align their personal work and values with the organization's mission and vision. Because no longer do they feel like they have to comply to something or they're being told something. They feel empowered to be a part of it, and even through their salary, to be a part of the organization. Yes, all of the places that the research has been done, it's not irresponsible. Nobody's making $10,000 than making $1 million. There are always boundaries, right? However, what most of these companies and the startups are doing are, if people ask for something way out of bounds, they make 50,000, they're asking for 150, the human-centered response to that is not, that's stupid, you're fired, go away. It's, well, what value are you going to bring to the organization if we're going to pay you that much? What can you do? What are the things that you're going to do that's going to help us meet our mission for that kind of value? And if that person can do that, then wouldn't you want to pay them that? Wouldn't you want to make that happen? Absolutely. But you never get to that question with that person unless you switch the mindset of how you approach HR. Unless you approach it from a human-centered, employee or member-based idea, you will never get to that place. You'll never fully get people engaged into what you're doing. Most of our organizations and churches have problems with alignment. Top, bottom, trying to get vision going. This is one way that through HR you can actually encourage that and make that happen. So, relationships are key, right? As we think about how we reflect Jesus into the world, we lead others in a way that shows Him. And allowing our systems to also reflect that is really, really important. So trying to switch from a compliance model or here are the edicts from on high that you have to align with, to a type of model where you are listening and learning and engaging with all levels of the people that are interacting with your organization is the number one thing to do. The people who occupy the top level positions no longer need to be pronouncers within the organization. They need to be listeners as their primary thing that they do. By gathering the information and the data from people, by hearing them, by understanding who they are and what they're all about, what their needs and wants and desires are, that is the only way that alignment of strategy, alignment of vision, alignment of mission is going to happen. And then thinking about how you can make your organization, it's hard, what terms do we use, right? It's not employees, churches really aren't just all about the members either, it's about the community, it's about, all the people that interact with who you are. So I just put the word user there. It sounds very Tron, it's just sterile for a human-centered thing, but forgive me for that, please. But you get what I'm coming to, right? Making the organization centered around the people who are interacting with it instead of the people who are paid to run it, in a sense. Flip it around. The main question you ask yourself to help you not make this mistake is, am I behaving, am I thinking, am I organizing around, are other people greater than me? Are other people more important than me? And this is a typical Jesus-centered gospel, living out the gospel in the world question. But reminding us to use it within even our work and our systems. All right. Those are 3. I told you I just had 3. That's all I got for now. Suggested resources, incredible books that are based on great research. Daniel Kahneman, Richard Thaler, both Nobel Prize winners. David Epstein was the Range book I mentioned. And one of the better leadership books, it's not like the 3, magic bullets to leadership, but Ken Blanchard did write a book based on his situational leadership model called Lead Like Jesus, and it's not cheesy. Like, you see a title like that and you're like, another Jesus book. What is going on here? It's actually really, really good. It's based on research not just within the business world, but within churches as well. And he uses his model that he's been using for a long time. Models have pluses or minuses. They're not perfect. But it's really helpful to think through some of these things. That's all I got for you. That was only 3. It's a lot. So, novelty and nuance. What was the second one? Chasing the winners instead of avoiding losses. Oh, by the way, people avoid losses like the plague. Like, they feel losses twice as much as they feel wins. As much as you like to give wins, they feel losses twice as bad. So they will go with you in that. They will avoid loss at all costs. And the last one was bringing the human back into human resources. Yeah, cool. It's. Can we open the door? Is it really warm in here to anybody else? Yeah. Okay. Oh my gosh, I'm done though. What am I feeling pressure for? So please, questions, comments. If you need to leave, feel free. That's all right. no hard feelings, but yeah, we'll take questions.
The research you were citing the model of asking people to look up their own, pick their own salary.
Yeah.
Did they go, was that just on an executive level, or was that
No,
to
through the whole organization.
guy who's
Yep. Everybody. Everybody. It was in one of the cases, it seems like in most of the cases, there's only one or two people, a very small percentage, who would just do something way off. And then those were conversations that had to be had and go the same route you were thinking. Well, here's the kind of range that makes sense. Let's stick within here, those kind of things. But typically it was, most people did ask for a raise. You know, a couple people, in the one study I read, a couple people actually asked to be paid less. They actually wanted a decrease in salary. But it was because they wanted more flexibility in their job. They only wanted to work 4 days a week. They needed to do this, this, this. I will do less. Here's what I'm going to do for that. And they were fine with that. You know, yeah, it's wild.
Do you know if any American companies have tried that as well?
The recent research is American.
Oh.
It's all in, most of it is in startups. So it's probably in smaller organizations, less than 40 employees, I believe, was where the max was. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You kind of hit on something with avoiding losses, and I agree with you. People like to avoid losses,
Yeah.
like to play.
Yeah.
But opposite of your model, I think the way they try to avoid losses is they make the target bigger.
Yeah.
So they make that outside circle bigger so that
Yeah.
everything becomes a win, right? And,
Yep.
but the danger in that then is everything is scattered. You don't. So how do you kind of balance that between playing to the idea of avoiding losses, but
Yeah.
still trying to shrink that circle?
It's a good question. I think that goes back to novelty and nuance, right? If everything is a win, everything is novel, right? It's just whatever. But in reality, what is truly a win? Like if you're aiming at everything, what are you going to hit? Yeah, you're going to hit nothing, really. There's no win. There's no win in that. So if you're really aligned to a vision, if you're working towards something, there is a defined goal.
Yeah.
There's a defined win.
Vision.
Yeah. And if everybody has their own, it's going everywhere else. So that's a whole other issue that you have to deal with. But once you can identify what that narrow success is, you have to be honest that that's the success you're looking for. That's what you're aiming towards. Now, God may have other plans. He may make you do some other success in another realm that you had never anticipated. That's okay. You just reevaluate when you get there. Right? It's about feedback loops, figuring it out, iterating it, making it work. Yeah. Yes?
So your second point's fascinating to me because not many people would articulate it that way. They'd say it's too negative.
Sure.
No, I'm not, and actually I agree with you. Often, as the lead guy in the team, I'm saying I have to think through all the ways this could go wrong. How do you keep it positive? How do you keep? Because you're still attaining goals. You're still shooting for what's God calling us to do.
Yeah.
How do you keep it positive? Because it seems like and sometimes that's a challenge for me. It's been. I'm always thinking
Sure.
what could go wrong.
The mistake is chasing winners too much. Sometimes that's a personality thing, right? If you are somebody that is overly optimistic to a fault, you will chase winners too far before you realize the rational thing that's happening. Or on the other side, if you are too pessimistic, you'll always see the loss in everything, and you have to be shaken out of that to help people see the win. There's a part of your own makeup that goes into that as a leader. However, I find it freeing to help people understand that, hey, we're going to at the outset get rid of a lot of these ways that this could just go wrong and not be surprised by it. I think that's a win in and of itself because it's not coming from you. Like you think it through because it ultimately falls on you as the one that's responsible. But having your team enunciate those things sometimes brings up elephants in the room that you really weren't willing to talk about that maybe is healthy. It helps them narrow it down and see that, hey, what we're doing actually has a better chance of winning at that time. Yeah. Yeah, you really don't want to talk about it as, hey, how can we avoid losing here? I don't think that's going to work. That's not going to work at all. Anyone else? This was a little deep for 8:30 in the morning. I apologize. I didn't have any role in scheduling. But I hope it helps you think through some things. And I hope it gives you some things to talk about and And as you see leadership books, as you see leadership things, that you can evaluate and think through them as well. So I'm going to close out here. I'm going to turn this off. Can we pray together before we leave? All right, cool.